One must never ask more of fortune than she can grant. Napoleon Bonaparte. He became a great general, an emperor. He had 11 separate European coalitions of multiple nations each come against him. And he had under him France, Italy, and for some of it Spain, but mainly he had multiple nations come against him in 11 different coalitions. What Napoleon was fighting against was not the idea that France's borders had to be contained. He wasn't trying to expand the borders of France. He was trying to spread the idea of liberty that he had in his head. The one that was born out of Roman republicanism and ancient virtue. Not long after Napoleon died, first exiled to Elba and slowly poisoned, probably. But not long after he died, the world went the way of republicanism anyway, of representation in government. Why does the world resist changes that are obvious? The Roman Republic, those who killed Julius Caesar in the Senate chamber, they were fighting against tyranny. They hated the idea of a tyrant. But then all those, including Brutus and others, after they killed him, they tried to fight to become the tyrants, the dictators themselves. It's almost like they didn't realize the irony of their situation or the irony of what they were doing. And that inability plagues humankind. People fight each other just to back an idea that was ill-conceived. The United States of America, for instance, at the time, the colonial delegation, the colonial powers, the colonial elite in the United States, and the colonies in the United States, America, they did not like the taxes that were being forced upon them by the crown in Britain, in the United Kingdom. But before that, George Washington had fought in the British Army in the French and Indian War. There was a whole lot of money spent protecting colonists in the colonies in America, North America, because they just kept on moving west. And Britain kept on saying, basically their country at the time, they kept on saying, stop moving west, stop doing that. And they kept on doing it, and the French and Indian War happened, and the Crown spent a lot of money fighting back basically the French and Native American response to the colonists. And they fought them back enough, won the war, and then we don't have enough money to kind of not only defend you as much, but we're broke. So they increased taxes. So the taxes on molasses, for instance, originally it was I think the taxes was about, I think it was like a penny on a, anyway, it was very small, but it wasn't being enforced. But once the crown needed money, it was okay, we'll lower the amount of taxes, but we're gonna enforce it. So they lowered taxes by 2/3, but they're we're gonna actually enforce these taxes because the crown is out of money. Now the elite in the colonies in North America, British colonies, they were oh, we can't allow these taxes on molasses or sugar or anything that's stopping us from producing large amounts of alcohol because it's going to cut into our margins. Let's rile up everybody beneath us. Let's rile up those who basically everybody who is below us, because there wasn't really that sector as much between, like, the top of colonial society, then, the white people that were still white and still free, and then all the servants below. There wasn't as much of a divide. So everybody below, everybody on top, everybody below the aristocracy, the colonial aristocracy, everybody below them, they riled them up. It's like, how dare they tax us for something that's, for these things that we produce? How dare they put any taxes upon us? So literally, the colonial North American elites basically gave a bunch of alcohol to the people that were kind of like directly below them, which was mostly everybody, and got them riled up. Like, how do these British, who are on the other side of the pond, dare try to say that we are a part of them, that they care about our colonies, that they deserve to have any reign over us as colonials just because we're from Britain. Keep in mind that the colonists, they did have representation, but only if they were in Britain. Their class, the Commons of the House in the Parliament. I think it was the lower house or Commons. I think it's Commons, but they did have representation as far as their class goes. But because they became colonials in the American colonies, they didn't have direct representation. They only had the class representation, and the American colonials didn't have to move here. And then not having direct representation, having representation that was many, many months of travel by sea apart, didn't have to come here. And keep in mind that my ancestors have been here for quite a while, so some of them were the first ones that came over here. And of course, some of the Cherokee and Aztec as well that were here much longer. But regardless, it's just it's strange to me, the sense of not self-entitlement as much as self-obsession with the idea that, we fought against taxation. We fought against taxation without representation. You didn't have to come here. You also didn't have to fight with the Native Americans and French so much that they fought back and cost the crown a whole lot of money, the British crown a whole lot of money. And then slavery became, like, of course, a huge issue between the North and the South colonies. But in general, the Founding Fathers, they kind of were okay with slavery. Thomas Jefferson, I remember reading this this description and this plea for anybody who found his slave to return him and he'd be punished or whatever. And I was like, man, this is a terrible description of another human being. Thomas Jefferson also had a wife that was African, and they were in, I believe, France. And he told her that, as long as she came back to the United States again, to North America, they could finalize their marriage or whatever. But no, he was just using her as a sex slave. George Washington, he had, I believe, 200 to 300 African slaves that he moved between Pennsylvania and another state, just so because he was in a northern state, just so that he could keep on moving them back and forth so that they weren't in one place long enough to where they could be free. Benjamin Franklin, honestly, I don't think he had any slaves. I think Benjamin Franklin is kind of like, I wouldn't say he's untouchable, but he didn't, as far as I know, he didn't have any slaves, and he didn't do as much slaver activity as the other founding fathers. But Thomas Paine, he got done dirty. He really believed in freedom. He really believed in the rights of every man. He really believed in the people and the power of the people. He was in England when the French overthrew King Louis, I think the 14th. Thomas Paine was like, yeah, because the French asked him, hey, how should we punish him? And Thomas Paine's like, yeah, send him back to colonial America so that he can experience democracy and it'll change his mind. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. And we're going to put you in jail again. But they didn't put him in jail originally. The Crown actually put him in jail. But Thomas Paine kept on not being executed, and then the revolution happened, blah, blah, blah. But Thomas Paine's common sense was really remarkable as a segue between colonialism and human rights. Pretty remarkable. There's a whole lot of things about the founding of the United States, founding of America, and the things between then and now that make us not look as good as a lot of the history that you learn in school. A lot of the history that we learn in grade school, middle school, high school, is not the best. For instance, we rarely learn about something like sterilization of Native Americans, even in the 1970s, by the United States government. And the Canadians are, I mean, that's not part of our government, but the Canadians have really treated the Native Americans very badly as well. In fact, the first Thanksgiving, very good. Native Americans, I believe the Iroquois tribe, went to I think Plymouth Rock. Anyway, some of the first pilgrims showed them how to plant corn by putting fish into the ground, digging a hole, putting fish in there, fish head, I think, and then putting a seed underneath it to fertilize it so that they could actually, grow whatever crop they were growing. I think it was corn, but I could be wrong. They were working together. And then by the next Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims, the first colonial Americans from Britain, they had taken, I don't know if it's a chief, but it was definitely a Native American head, put it on a pike, placed it in the center of their village, and had the second Thanksgiving around it. They started thinking of the Native Americans as not as human beings, but as animals. Just like you would taxidermy an animal or put a bear head or a wolf head on a pike and talk about how manly you are. They do the same thing with Native Americans. And they did that quite a lot, not just ending with that, but the second Thanksgiving, they had, dinner. I'm not sure if it was dinner, but it was some meal around a piked head. That's how long it took. And I don't know what happened to the two interpreters, because there was one interpreter for the Pilgrims and one interpreter for the Native Americans, and they kind of went back and forth. But it's crazy how quick judgment and hatred and dehumanization can just flip, just very quickly. It's disturbing. But, the United States, America, is not faultless. And a lot of people who hurt the Native Americans are now mixed with Native American. Like me, I'm 15% Cherokee and 15% Aztec. And then 10% African. And then the rest is like Scandinavian with some, Scottish and Irish in there. But we've all mixed together at this point, which makes it so confusing as far as, I guess you can say, morality goes. Because nobody now is responsible for that back then. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of it. We have to understand it. We have to accept that people have done this in the past and that it affects today. Everybody who has been wronged in the past, for instance, African Americans, slavery ended over 100 years ago. Why are they still bent out of shape over it? Rights don't immediately go to a people after something like that ends. It takes time because the system was always designed to abuse those people. And then once those abuses, start to lessen over time, we get to something like Jim Crow laws, but that's a whole other thing. So just because freedom technically exists by law doesn't mean that it actually exists in implementation. Because, for instance, African Americans, using that example, just because they technically have the same rights doesn't mean the economic and socio-political position that they've been put in as a whole just remedies because they have the right by technical law. It takes a long time for communities to come out of those situations. It doesn't happen just like that. And the guilt of anybody, maybe even somebody I'm related to, has for those violations of justice and humanity, those can't be forgotten, and they can't be tossed aside either. They must be understood if we're to move forward as a single America, a single race, because there's only one race, and a single world, a single humanity. We have to understand the past, even if we're this ethnicity or that ethnicity, individual without any mixing of ethnicities. We have to understand that others have gone through things that we can't comprehend and we don't feel societally or economically. Once we understand that, we greet each other, then we can move forward as a human race. But regardless, thank you very much for watching. Hit a thumbs up down there. Feel free to share this video wherever you want. And I hope all of you have a wonderful day.